I think that it would just be some kind of practical advice when you're caught in repeating patterns of emotion and behavior that seem almost like out of your control.
Well, there are a couple of layers to this. So firstly, and we and Lee have been talking about this at length in various teachings over the last months and year. You are in a period of time where body trauma is leaving the planet more and more. Now, you may say, well, it doesn't look like it. It looks like there are just as many re-traumatizing events taking place. But we would say the opportunity through re-traumatization is to see and know the trauma and work to release it. Now, there are certain scenarios on Earth where you are trapped in trauma, and we don't want to not acknowledge that. There are certain cultures, there are certain life situations that people find themselves in that are very traumatizing. And that is not something that is easy to get above or get beyond in the moment that you are trapped in it or it is happening. But when you speak about repeating patterns, there are a few different depths to your question. So the deepest depth of repeating patterns and behaviors is to ask yourself, what trauma in my body needs more help than my mind or my awareness can give? You can have epiphanies about what you could do differently, how you could support yourself to do things differently. But if you've tried so many things and you still find yourself compelled to repeat something that you know is not good for you, particularly if it is highly distressing for you, or it is lowering your frequency in a way that you recognize is not good, that is the time to go to body-based trauma support. You may choose to work with a practitioner of this. You may choose to educate yourself through books and videos to try and understand it a bit more. So that is the deepest layer of repetitive behaviors. And the way you will know you need to look at what trauma your body is carrying that you have less control over than you would like when it comes to changing your patterns and behaviors is the depth of the problem. So for example, we will look at addiction as an example here, because this is quite popular on Earth and quite well understood, increasingly understood, that there are those who have addictive tendencies that will send them to what some of you will call the depths. The term is often called rock bottom. They repeat this pattern over and over again with ever worsening circumstances and effects until they hit the floor in such a way that they realize they have to overcome this addictive behavior. So too is that what's happening for many of you on the planet right now around your patterns and behaviors that you are repeating. But if we move up the scale, a little away from deep body-based trauma that is the thing that's in your way, the question to always ask yourself is, rather than trying to control or limit your behavior or modify your behavior for a while before you go back to the behavior again, ask yourself, what am I getting out of this? So let's say you know that eating too much sugar isn't good for you, and yet you find yourself doing it over and over again. A question that you can ask yourself is, why am I doing this? And then a second question, if you don't get an answer on why am I doing this, is what am I getting out of it? Because we promise you, you're getting something out of it. Now you may say, well, I'm not, because then I feel terrible the next day and I know better. No. Some part of your timeline, and maybe it's your 5-year-old self or your 12-year-old self, has an alignment with this as a way of soothing, or a way of comforting, or a way of detaching, because sugar has a very powerful effect on the body. So it is its own kind of drug, and it is giving you some moment of escape. So rather than beat yourself up for reaching for the cookie jar every time you feel overwhelmed, if you ask yourself, what am I getting out of this? And the answer is, it helps me switch off. And then you say, why do I need to switch off? And you hear, because I'm stressed and overwhelmed. So you currently see cookies and sugar as the solution to being stressed and overwhelmed. Are you happy with that solution? You say no. So what you need to do is get ahead of the stress and overwhelm. Where are areas of your life stressing you out or overwhelming you? And how are you going to start to identify what those areas are and bring in other things to soothe you? So for example, let's say Lee was the one going for the cookie jar. He wouldn't get very far if he just started beating himself up or promising himself and all his friends, I will never eat a cookie again. Well, that's not really getting to the bottom of the problem, is it? But if he realizes that stress and overwhelm is what's making him reach for this changed state that sugar gives him, and this feeling of escape, and this feeling of temporary pleasure, and this feeling of uplifting himself, he will realize, oh, I'm not giving myself what my energy field needs. So I'm going for this quick hit as a remedy to my starvation in my energy field. If he identifies that, and then he starts asking himself, well, what makes me feel less stressed or overwhelmed? And Deva Premal and Miten come up as one of his things. Then he starts to rewire his pattern by including the things that will help him avoid stress and overwhelm before he forcibly removes or restricts the cookie behavior. And what he will find at some point is the cookies are no longer that interesting. Maybe once or twice a year he likes to do that, but he will slowly let it go. The more he gets to the bottom of what that behavior is trying to fix and gives himself alternatives to fixing the behavior before he gets to that point. So that is just one example of how it works. So the questions to ask are, what am I getting out of this, or what do you think you're getting out of it? Why am I needing to do this? Ask yourself what, ask yourself why, and when you've identified those questions, then start to ask yourself, okay, so what other remedies can I start bringing into my life before I get so desperate that I have to do this thing that no longer feels true to me as a solution?
Wow.